Hi, my name is Anna,
Hi, my name is Nora.
and we are both a part of Girls of Steel Robotics, a all-girls first robotics team from Carnegie Mellon University in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania.
Today we're talking to Pratima Gluckman, an author and engineering leader at VMware Incorporated in California.
So thank you for being here.
Thank you.
We're going to start it with a question from when you were young. So when you were young, did you know that you wanted to be an engineer?
Yes, I did. I think I was one of the lucky kids. I took a programming class at school. I was 14, and that made me fall in love with it. It was basic programming. I'm outdating myself many years ago, but that really excited me. My dad was an engineer, so I had a role model. My brother was an engineer, and I had role models, and I went to an all-girls school. A lot of the senior women in my school, they wanted to go get engineering degrees, and I had plenty of role models, which made it possible for me, and also because I fell in love with programming. It just didn't seem, it was a no-brainer. It was something that I truly was meant to do, and I always talk about this, and I say I was born to be an engineer, in some sense, because the way it worked out for me.
What do you love about programming?
It's just solving problems. I think that's the big piece of it. You have a problem, and how do you want to solve it? And you can actually solve it with code. Like, you can run these lines of code, and you can actually solve it, and your program comes to life, right? And that is the exciting piece of it. When you watch a movie, like if you watch Toy Story or you watch any of the animated movies, the lighting that happens, like just the lighting in the phones, are actually all run by code. So you can imagine the power of code. It can actually do that.
Oh, that's interesting. I never really thought of that. Who are the people that champion you along the way and encourage you to become an engineer?
This was my parents. My mom mostly. I had a great relationship with her. She was very supportive. And my older sister, she played cricket for India. And cricket is a man's game when I was growing up. It still is in some sense. It's like soccer for women here. And she loved playing cricket. She played for the country. She won World Cups for the country. And my parents encouraged her to do what she wanted to do. They encouraged me to be an engineer. And there was never any message, boys do this, girls do this. My brother turned out to be an engineer, but there was never any messages that I received growing up that I couldn't do engineering or my sister couldn't go play cricket with the boys. And that was pretty empowering to grow up in a family where I was encouraged. And I also had wonderful teachers. I think my math teacher was remarkable. I think she really helped me just have that love for math that I had, and really recognizing that and applauding me for that. She always encouraged me. She would call me out in class, and she would specifically say something really nice about me, which was very, very nice to hear. And that, I think, was very helpful for me because I had that encouragement along the way. Not always. When I went to get my engineering degree, it wasn't like I had a lot of support, or my master's. But early on, I had that encouragement.
It's really cool that you always knew that it was right for you. But whenever it came time to have to make decisions about what type of engineering, how did you go about that?
So I fell in love with programming, but I didn't have any programming after that. It was the age I grew up in. Now it's different. You've got, both of you are programming in Java right now. Yeah. Isn't that cool? Yeah. I mean, you're doing the mechanical stuff. You're actually programming in Java. Right. I never had that at your age. When I was in undergrad was when we had a C program class and we had Java. Most of the computer science we learned was data structures and algorithms. It wasn't, we didn't have much programming. And when I went to my undergrad, I actually went to a very tough school in the sense that it was hard to get in. And I got a master's in chemistry, and I got a bachelor's degrees in instrumentation. I couldn't get the computer science degree. But after I graduated, that's when I went off and got a master's in computer science. It wasn't until I went through my own journey I knew I wanted to be an engineer. I didn't know what I wanted to do. I loved chemistry. I loved math. And so it was a journey of just discovering myself. But after that first programming class, if I had more, maybe it would have solidified my interest in computer science. But I didn't have that opportunity. I didn't have that growing up. And so I kind of knew I wanted to be an engineer like my dad and my brother. I didn't know what engineering, so I tried mechanical. I tried a bunch of things. And then finally, it was only after I graduated with an undergraduate degree, that's when I went and got a master's in computer science.
That sounds like a really long journey throughout college.
Yes.
But during that journey, was there anyone there that like kept encouraging you to go back to college and like try out different things and interests that you had?
It's also, I think, very cultural. Like I was born and raised in India, and in India, whether it's good or bad, they have this path set out for you in some sense. It's like you're either an engineer, doctor, or a lawyer, right? And it's never been like be an artist or be whatever you wanted to be. I think it was more, it's very academic the way we kind of grow up. And so going to college was something that we just had to do. And my mom, especially with my older sister, because she wasn't very academically inclined, she wanted to play cricket. And cricket's a hard game. It's, you go out in the morning at 4 a.m., you're practicing, you're playing all these matches, you come home. But she did insist, she said, you can go play cricket as much as you want, but I need you to get a degree. So she went and got a degree. She got her master's in literature. But that was important. It was more like, it doesn't matter what you do, but you need to get a college degree. And I think it was because my mom didn't have a college degree herself. I think it was, she didn't have that, and so she really wanted that for the kids. And sometimes that helps because you want more for your kids than what you had, right? And it's just a natural tendency. And so she didn't get a college degree, and she made sure that we had college degrees no matter what we did. But that was one thing. It's like you can do whatever you want to do. Go play music or you can play cricket, but you need that. So that was always kind of drilled into us in some sense.
So when you were in college and you were going through all this with your amazing support system that you had at home, how did teamwork with the people that were around you in your classes or in college, or even now on the job, how does that all play into what you do?
That's a great question. In school, there wasn't a lot of teamwork. I think it was very isolated for us. It was more just you getting things done. Yes, we did have, we broke apart in groups to do like a project or whatever, but it was very short-lived. We didn't build relationships with that. And what I see with what you girls are doing is amazing, because you do this year over year and you're building relationships. And these relationships are so important. You're building a support network right here. And I didn't have that growing up. But once I got into the tech industry, yes, that's when teamwork became very critical. And right now it's all about the team. It's not about yourself. And so right now I manage a bunch of engineers. And so it's all about teamwork. If they execute and they're successful, then I'm successful. So my success depends on them. So teamwork becomes very, very critical at this point. But I didn't have that growing up in school.
Because you didn't have that, did you experience any challenges, like automatically going into teamwork in the tech industry?
Yeah, it was challenging because, you're like an individual contributor, right? Like you've got like these silos that you're working in, and now you have to figure out how to work with people. And so that's always hard. And when I started my career in the tech industry, I was an engineer. So I wrote code. And finally, after some time, when I became a manager, a first-time manager, I had to stop writing code and let other people do it, right? It's like giving up that control. And that was very hard. That transition is super hard because you want to control everything. But then you have to realize that giving up that control is actually the best thing. Mm-hmm. And yeah, it's a fine dance.
So with all of these roadblocks or things you had to overcome throughout college and your career. What are some examples of persistence that you saw, or what it means to persist through that? Because I know you talk about that a lot in your book.
So I got a 5-year engineering degree. So I was on campus for 5 years. That was hard. I was away from home. I left when I was 17 to get my bachelor's degree. I went to school in the north. My family was in the south, and I had to take a train to get there. It would take us 24 hours to get there. So that was hard. Leaving home was hard, just being homesick. And on campus, I went to the school, and it's like, in a sense, CMU, because you're like the smartest kid in your town, and then you go to university, and everyone is smart.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
Right.
And then that's when you go like, oh my God. And persisting through that, like just going through that year by year by year, right? It's like you have this goal that you want to graduate no matter what. You want to get that degree, right? And you're going to have down days. You're going to have positive days. You're going to have ecstatic days, right? You're going to go through all of that. And how do you persist through that? And how do you keep coming back? And how do you keep showing up? It's like, how do you go to bed in the night and you wake up the next morning and you show up? And persistence is just showing up. That's all it is. In anything, right? Like showing up at the gym every morning is persistence, right? It's just showing up. It's like showing up every time. And I think through just the tech industry, I didn't realize I was persisting. I was more like, this is my job and I have to feed my family. But it is, when you have a down day at work, how do you go back the next day and persist through that? For me, writing the book was actually a lot more persistence. I needed a lot more for that because I'm not a writer. I mean, I wasn't, I'm not like one of the writers that's not my profession. My profession is being an engineer, but I chose to write a book. And persisting through that was actually very hard. And what I did was I actually learned from the women in the book. There was this one woman, her name is Dr. Telly Whitney. She co-founded this conference called Grace Hopper Celebrations. At some point when you get to undergrad, you should check out that conference. When you go to that conference, you will find like 23,000 young women with STEM degrees. And if people say there's a hiring problem, they should just go to Grace Hopper Conference. And she co-founded the Grace Hopper Conference, and she's impacted the lives of so many women in her 30-year career. And I was sitting opposite her, and I was interviewing her, and I asked her, do you have something called this imposter feeling that you're not good enough? And she said, yes, every day. And I said, so how do you overcome that? And she said, I just show up. And I think that helped me through writing the book because it was something I really wanted to do, but I had to show up every day to do something about it. And, I lost my mom during the time I was writing the book, and, your parents is like the most important relationship you can ever have in your life. And I lost that, and I didn't know how to deal with that. And it was like 3 months where I didn't write. And I had to come back to it. So it was not writing and then coming back to it and just taking that break. But then I just had to show up until the day it published, right? Just showing up is actually very critical.
First of all, sorry for your loss.
Thank you.
So you talk about persistence and the challenges that you faced, and talk about showing up. What were some of the challenges that you face now being a working mom?
I have 3 kids. I have an 8-year-old and I have twins who are 5. The challenge I faced was, with my first child, I had 8 weeks of maternity leave. So, you're pregnant, you give birth, and then you're back at work. And in 2010, there wasn't a lot of support. It's like you come back and you want to get back into the thick of things, and people around you are making assumptions that, oh, she just had a baby, maybe she shouldn't be working on this high-profile project. So they're all making these assumptions about you. They're not coming to you and asking you, like, what would you prefer? Like, do you want flexible hours, or are you okay? I mean, I had a situation where my husband was a stay-at-home dad, and so I had the baby, I gave the baby to him, and I ran. But they made assumptions because I'm a woman, and they assumed that I needed to do a lot of things at home for the baby or whatever. Like, it wasn't like, oh, you know, you have a partner who's also, it's your child. It's not, it's their child in some sense, right? So I think society has this implicit bias when it comes to women. And that's what I faced for my first child. And then when I had my twins, I had to be back in 6 weeks.
Oh, wow.
And I did. I was back at work in 6 weeks. Now VMware has 18 weeks for maternity leave, and they also have 18 weeks for paternity leave, which is awesome. Because what happens is when you don't give the man that much time to take care of their child, then you start setting these bad habits in women, because what happens is you're overwhelmed, you have a child, and then, you know, your spouse has to go off to work, and your spouse is not getting the time to be with you. And so then the responsibility is on the woman. And now the tech industry is making those changes, which is amazing to see, but I didn't have that. For me, I had a lot of support, and I know a lot of women don't have that. I had a stay-at-home dad, and so I didn't have to worry about picking up the kids, dropping off the kids to school, packing their lunch. I mean, he took care of all of that. But I do know that women have to do it all. I can't do it all. There's no way in hell I can do it all. Like, it's impossible. I don't think it's humanly possible to expect the woman to cook, clean, take care of the kids, go have a high-profile job, write a book, all of that, right? And so I was lucky. The best thing you can do for your career is the partner you choose. And since you're young girls, when you get to that stage, you have to be very choosy and picky and try to find someone who's going to be supportive of your career as well, right? And your career is not a backseat for them. And figuring that out is very important. So I had that support structure. So in some sense, I've been lucky, but I do know the women on my team are not that lucky, and so we have conversations about it. I coached one of the women on the team where she was taking a backseat in her career because her husband, his career was important, and then we had that conversation. And all it did for her was to actually have a conversation with her spouse. And then he went like, oh, I didn't realize this was important to you. Okay, we can make things work. So I think it's also the conversations that you have. And I was just telling someone the story this afternoon, and I write about this in my book. My husband actually came to me at some point and he said, Pratima, you know, I've been a stay-at-home dad for 7 years. I would have made so much money, and now I've lost it all. So can you pay me? Because it's hard work. And staying home, taking care of children is hard work. And he said, can you pay me $6,000? And I was shocked. But it was fair. I mean, what he was asking was fair. He was basically saying, you know, this is hard work. And I said, you know, I can't afford $6,000. I'll give you $2,000. So I give him the money because I think it's fair for him to know that he's appreciated, that staying at home, taking care of kids is not an easy job. It's not something that I can do. And he's able to do that. And he needs to be appreciated for it and paid for it. So he gets that. But how many women actually have that conversation with their spouses?
You were talking about how you can't do it all, and you came across that realization, but I know a lot of girls that I've talked to, even myself, think that at points that they have to do it all or they can do it all and put too much on themselves at one time. How did you realize that you can't do it all?
It's all based on priorities. So at the beginning of the year, I asked myself, what's my priority this year? And I'll come up with 3 or 4 priorities. And sometimes they change. Sometimes it's family, sometimes it's work, sometimes it's writing a second book, right? It just depends. So you prioritize. You say, okay, what's important, and the rest you delegate. And you have to learn how to give up control. It's hard. But we think we can do it all, and we like to think we can do it all, but And perhaps you can, but then you are going to be deficient in something. That something is going to give way, right? And so there are times when I put my work ahead of my family, and there are times I put my family ahead of my work. And it's fine, and you just have to figure out what works for you, what doesn't. There's times when I didn't bake that birthday cake for my son, but then the next year I did. And so it's just being gentle and kind to yourself, right?
Yeah.
That's important, being gentle and kind to yourself and saying, yeah, I can't do this, but maybe somebody else can. And ask for help.
So if you had the chance to say something to your high school self, what would you tell her?
I would tell my high school self to set goals. That was something that I never did. And I drifted through life, which I think most of us end up doing. And just setting goals, that would have been something I would have really wanted for myself. Setting goals in high school and college, and even when I got into the workforce, is setting those goals and trying to achieve them. You can set like yearly goals, 5-year goals, whatever. I mean, sometimes people ask this question, how do you see yourself 5 years from now? And it's always a tough question to answer. But if I had asked myself at high school, 5 years from now, what is the person I want to be? More than just achievements or whatever. It's like, who do I want to be 5 years from now? And if I had really sat down and pondered and deeply thought about that question, I probably could have carved something out for myself, and I didn't. I just went about kind of drifting and not really staying like laser focused on some of that. And I did talk about, the support that I had from, family. And also, they helped me through a lot of that, right? Like, they would also encourage me. And I know a lot of people don't have that kind of encouragement, because we all come from different backgrounds, and you might not be lucky enough to have that encouragement growing up. And what I found, at least through the research for my book, is we talk about career interventions, right? So there's formal career interventions and there's informal career interventions. So when you talk about formal career interventions, you have, I'm sure at schools or universities, like when you're graduating, you have these people come and they mentor you and they talk to you about different careers. But what I found is very informal career interventions have been so powerful. And those interventions come from your parents, they can come from your teacher, they can come from friends. And so that means each of us is empowered to intervene in someone's life or career. Like, you can intervene in her career. Like, you are empowered to do that. And I think we don't realize that. That could be some message you give her. It could be a very positive message you give her. People can intervene with negative messages as well. Right? They can say something negative and really change the course of someone's life. And you can say something positive and you can change the course of someone's life. And so if you don't have that support at home, and you don't have that support in school, with your teachers, you could have that support with your friends. And building that support network, because those interventions are so critical. And you'll find that in the book. There's this one woman called Dr. Orna Berry. She was the first female chief scientist in Israel. And she got a master's degree, and she was driving her professor home one day, and she wanted to go work. And in Israel, a lot of people want to get PhDs. And her professor told her, he said, Orna, I won't tell you that you're very smart, but I will tell you there are a lot of dumb people who get PhDs. And he said, I will give you a recommendation letter, and you should go get a PhD. And she did. And she said that changed the course of her life, because once she got a PhD, she had the confidence to go start her company. So she became an entrepreneur, and she worked for Dell EMC. So she's had a very successful career. She was the first female chief scientist in Israel. But it was that 2 sentences her professor told her while driving her home. So you can imagine that how impactful that is. And the fact that you girls are here with the Girls of Steel Robotics, I can't imagine how much encouragement you get every day with the work that you're doing, right? And someone is intervening in your careers, as as we speak, right? Like every day that's happening, that's opening these doors for you and these opportunities for you, and you're thinking about, oh, where can I be? And I think you have to grab those opportunities that come along.
It's interesting because my interest of STEM and engineering like first started off because my friend intervened, and he like told me about computer programming and engineering and like all the cool stuff that he did, and that piqued my interest, and that like began my start in like researching programs I could do, and that's why I'm here now.
Yeah, and see how powerful that is, right? Like he encouraged you, he intervened. That's an intervention right there. You don't need formal career intervention. So I'm very, very big on informal career interventions, and I'm very big on this thing that all of us are empowered to intervene in someone's life. And you should feel empowered.
You talk a lot about the research that was put into your book and what you found out while writing your book. What was the most rewarding part in all the research and the writing and the publishing of your book?
I think what was rewarding, what wasn't the book process, writing the process, was rewarding in the sense that, writing is therapeutic in some sense, so I think that helped me. What's been rewarding is after the book has been published and the people that I'm talking to, it's amazing that I'm sitting with both of you today and chatting with you. It's just, I think that's so rewarding for me is when I go into companies and I talk, and I go to universities and I speak to the students, and I speak to people who are in their mid-level careers and the challenges that they're facing, and they walk away with their aha moment, right? And in some sense, I've intervened in their careers, and I think that is powerful, and that's been amazing for me. And this is time away from family and time away from work, but it's fascinating to see how empowered you can feel, and know also that you can actually change someone's life. And that was my motivation and goal, as well as I wanted to write this book because I was thinking if someone picks up the book and if it can change the trajectory of their life for the better, then that's amazing for me in some sense.
Well, your book is incredibly impressive.
Yes.
And,
Thank you.
And you talked to 26 women. Were there any stories that were completely different that just really stuck out to you as something that you've never seen or heard of before?
Yes, there's one story, and this woman's name is Orna Berryman. I have an Orna Berry and I have an Orna Berryman. She talks about her life in Israel during war, and she talks about, during the time when there was war in Israel. I mean, they're constantly having war, but during that time, there was a directive by the government when the siren goes off and they were going to get struck by a missile, that they would have to put their babies into this tent. And so she had a son, he was very young, and so she followed the orders. She put her child in this tent. And then she realized that her son was hyperventilating, and she had a mask on. So the whole thing was, she had a mask on, she put her child in the tent, and it was a life or death moment for her, because at that point she's like, my son is going to die. What do I do? So she took the mask off, she took a deep breath, and she said, I'm alive, I'm okay. And she pulled her child out. It so happened that there was something wrong with the tents. There was something was defective, and a lot of kids actually died because they followed the orders. And so for her, the lesson through that was challenging the status quo. Is that, we have these rules, and people make up these rules, and we don't ask them why, right? We don't challenge the status quo. And that's how she's led her life since then. She's always challenging the status quo. And, asking this question, why? Because, she just had this horrible experience where she could have lost her son because she was following the orders of the government. So that I thought was a bit different. And I worked with her and I saw how she operated, which was very fascinating to me because she wasn't breaking rules, but she was bending rules in some sense, but in a, in a legal way.
Yeah.
And and when I spoke to her more and dug deep into her life, I found this fascinating story, which actually kind of helped her through her life and her career.
You talk about that woman and trying to connect it back to your life. Who has served as a role model for you in your career?
I had a lot of role models in school growing up with, just being in an all-girls school. I had people going off and getting degrees, and so that was my role model in some sense. My sister was a role model in some sense as well because she was challenging the status quo. Girls don't play cricket, right?
Yeah.
And she's been a role model in that sense. At work, it was hard to find role models because you don't find women at really high positions. And that is one of the reasons why I wrote the book, because I wanted to create role models, because it's been hard for me to find role models in my work environment, because you don't find women at senior levels in companies.
You talk about having an aha moment in 2016.
Mm-hmm.
Do you see a change since in gender bias or women's roles in tech since then?
The change is very slow. It's not as fast as I would like it to be. If you look at just leadership of women in Fortune 500 companies today, we have around 26 women that run 500 companies. So the remaining are run by men. And so that percentage is around between 4 and 6%. And with that rate of change, we're not going to see equality at the top until 2085. So how old are you going to be?
Very old.
I would be 82.
Yes.
Yeah.
I don't want that in 2085. I want that in 2025. My daughter is 5. She'll be 67 or 68, 66.
Yeah.
I don't want that for her, and I don't want that for you. So I want that in 2025. I'm like impatient. And how can we get there? In some sense, role models, because if you know it's possible, you will do it.
Yeah.
Yeah, so has things changed since 2016? I think there's more awareness. There's a lot more awareness around it. People are talking about it. We didn't talk about it a lot before. And we're talking about how to make changes in the sense that in California, we have a law which says that in the board, we need to have at least one female. And people were upset about that because then it becomes quota system. But the fact that we had to do it says that things are really not changing.
Yeah.
And so now they have at least one woman on the board. And, we'll see how that change is going to help. But it actually does help to have a woman on the board at the highest level, because then the woman can hold everyone else accountable, be like, where are your senior women? Why don't we have senior women? Let's look for women and let's mentor them and sponsor them and let's bring them up. So there could be powerful changes a woman on a board can do. It's unfortunate that we had to force it to happen and make it a law, but it is what it is, and hopefully we'll start seeing some change. My hope is you guys are the future workforce, and that you will create that change for yourselves.
What's interesting is now in my school's curriculum, we have more of a focus on female empowerment and female leadership. And what I discovered is that a lot of people in my class don't view themselves as feminists, and the reason for that is they don't see a reason for it, or they don't see, or they already view as like men and women are already equal, so there's no reason for there to be feminists. What would you do, or like what would you say to those people who believe that men and women are equal and like there's no reason for all of this encouragement and empowerment and this need for like books about female role models and this interview that's happening right now?
No, that's a great question, but do they have data to back that up? It's all about data, right? We're all data-driven people. You guys are, hopefully future engineers. I'm an engineer. So look at the data. There is a serious pay gap, right? Women are paid in tech 90 cents to $1. In other industries, it's 75 cents to $1. So if there is equality in this world, then why do we have a pay gap? So that's the first thing to talk about, right?
Yeah.
VMware, my company, is 99 cents to $1. I'm really proud of them. They've really made huge effort to get there, and other companies are following suit. But what I'm saying is that's the data, and if they can back up that data, all power to them. But the data doesn't speak to that. If you look at the percentages of women in the workforce itself, or the percentage of women that graduate from grad school, CMU is 50-50 in undergrad. That's awesome. But if you look at undergrad, we're still struggling at the undergraduate levels. The higher we go in the pipeline, we're losing out women. So in some sense, if there was data to prove it, I would take it any day. But we don't have the data.
So in that line, what can we do as high schoolers or other high school girls out there to start these conversations that you started with your book and further all of the things that you believe and that we believe to be true as well?
Yeah, so what you're doing with the competition, the robotics competition, is amazing, right? And you guys are role models yourselves. Actually, you're a role model for me because I never got to do such cool stuff when I was your age. I don't think I can even build a robot, right? So you are role models. So you just know that you have the power in some sense, or you're empowered to pay it forward because you've had the opportunity to be on the team. I don't know if there's some way to talk about it within your school, encourage people in your school, all of you are connected on social media, brag about it, right?
Yeah,
yeah, you can do that. I mean, you have technology at your hand. You can make a viral video that can go crazy, and some young girls somewhere will probably watch that video and go like, oh, that's possible for me.
Yeah.
So you could do that. You've got everything at your hands.
Thank you. Going back on your career, what were some of the roadblocks that you faced? And if you did face any of them, how did you face them and how did you overcome them?
So the roadblocks I faced was I didn't have mentors. That was one thing. And I encourage everyone to get mentors if you can. Mentors are a big piece of your success in some sense. I didn't have mentors. And also the concept of a mentor is very new. Right? I mean, new in the sense that it's been around, people have been mentoring very unofficially, not knowing they've actually been mentoring. So that was one thing, is not having enough mentors. And in my career, not having enough sponsors. And what that means is a sponsor is someone who will actually make things happen for you, will give you some strategic project to work on, or who will promote you. And I didn't have sponsors. So those were some of the roadblocks I faced early on. So once I started realizing that, it's like, how do you get a mentor? That's when you go ask for help. You can actually walk up to someone and say, can you be my mentor? You can do that. Now, you can walk up to someone and say, can you be my sponsor? Because a sponsor, if they're sponsoring you, for instance, say you go off, you get a job, and then, you want to say, hey, you guys should check out Nora because I worked with her, she's cool. And so you are risking your credibility referring her, right? But you are kind of being a sponsor for her in some sense. So sponsors actually also have a reputation they have to defend. So the first thing is you have to be really good at what you do. So people will actually say, oh, yeah, she's great. I want to work with her, and I want her to do this. And so doing that is important. And then, you will get sponsors organically, but they might not know they're your sponsor, but you will know they're your sponsor. And sponsors will beget more sponsors. So when you get one sponsor, the sponsor is actually going around talking to their peers and their powerful people and saying how great you are. And so then you get more sponsors. So yeah. those are the two things I would say: mentors and sponsors.
Well, thank you so much for speaking with us today and sharing your inspirational story and
Yes.
from your book as well.
And
Thank you.
yes, thank you so much.
Thank you. I'm inspired by both of you. Thank you.
Thank
Keep doing what you're doing.
Thank you.